Welcome, everyone. Hopefully you had an easy journey coming into London. Roger, coming from abroad, yeah? Are you based in London? And Frederick?
Yeah.
You're based in London?
Based in London.
Jane, are you in London as well? Okay, because we did have some challenges this morning with the trains, as we do in London. So we're quite glad that we're able to live stream to everybody that wasn't able to be here. So we've got a big topic here, a really critical topic for all of us as humanity stands, sustainability. What is sustainability, right? We're talking about that balance between our economic opportunity, our social equality, our Earth's resources. These are the three pillars that really sustainability is all about. Environmental, how we look at our planet, how we look at our people, the social side, how do we manage our business and drive profit in our businesses, the governance side of things. For them to really, for all these elements to be able to really last and connect and have trade-offs amongst each other. Obviously, there's a huge overlap, and they have a big impact on one another. And also to sustain our ability to, have life on this earth, we also need to sustain our needs, not just for today, but actually for the future. We need to use Earth's resources in a way that we can use them forever. And in the sense that if we use too much of something today, it could be gone forever, right? So it needs to be, Earth needs the time to replenish itself, to be able to absorb, and to avoid generating too much waste too fast that impedes that Earth's ability to absorb them. That's really what sustainability is about. Now, we're talking about the ability to also achieve people's welfare, economic welfare. For this to happen, we need to limit our environmental impact and use these resources sustainably. So we've got 4 key perspectives that we're going to be tackling today that have a direct knock-on impact on our ability to drive profit. The consumer, how do we communicate our sustainability initiatives with the consumer? How does that impact our ability to convert more of our revenue and impacts our bottom line? How do we then asset manage our properties in a way that we are able to connect the resources that we use to the needs that we have? And how are we able then to protect and increase the asset value of our properties over the years? And lastly, we're going to talk about our planet. What are very practical solutions that we can keep in mind today that we can put into action that will help our business, because we'll see how sustainability is actually very profitable, but it also will protect our planet. So let's tackle the consumer side of things. I mean, how do we retain and grow a customer base in the face of a lot of, I would say, a lot of consciousness from our guests around sustainability? 4 out of 10 or every 4 travelers choose sustainability as a very important factor in their decision in selecting a particular destination or a hotel. We've seen big platforms and OTAs like Google, like Booking.com, like TripAdvisor, building infrastructure that enables the hotels to display their sustainability practices and properly identify themselves into those channels to make it a lot easier, obviously, for the traveler to find those sustainable properties. So, Frederick, let's go straight to you. How do we communicate with our customers? Cedar Capital Partners, obviously, you own so many assets, and you operate certain assets. And the Belfry is a very good example of that. It's one of the largest hospitality properties here in the UK, right? We've got 550 acres of land, 3 golf courses, 4 bars and restaurants, over 300 luxury bedrooms, and over 700 team members supporting us in our daily operation. You've been doing a lot of incredible work there, right? And you've got a very clear goal on becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Tell us more what are you doing from a sustainability standpoint? How are you demonstrating your commitment? And I remember in our briefing, you were telling me about this ESG committee where you've got a member of every single department coming together once a month to define specific initiatives that you're going to be progressing on your roadmap. Tell us more about those initiatives.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think we look at sustainability, ESG, that people throw these terms around, and I think it's really hard for consumers to really understand what that means. And I think as much as people say kind of ESG, once you dive into it, it gets super complicated really quickly. And I think it was quite important for us to take a step back and say, like, how does this translate to the everyday consumer? And part of that was, obviously, on our end, we need to define like a strategy, we need to set goals, we need to have a vision for what we want to achieve in terms of whether it's being carbon neutral or hitting certain like ESG targets or getting a BREEAM certification or whatever. But beyond that, we felt the need to create a specific page on our website. And then taking it a step further, we've created a document which we called the Belfry Green Story. It's a 14-page paper. It's available to all our guests. I think maybe less on the transient side because you're coming to the Belfry to play golf or to have a night away. But I think on the corporate side, it's a really powerful document where we can really outline very concrete steps, not just, we reduced our, kilowatt hour consumption, or we reduced the amount of water we use every day. We really set out to them from a social perspective, an environmental perspective, the people, the ecosystem, and we explain to them everything that we're doing. So it's not just about kind of saving money and kind of improving the bottom line. It's about explaining to them, look, this is the waste we produce, we're transparent about it, and this is what we're doing about that waste. We're trying to recycle like 150 tons of food waste every year. We're trying to do this in terms of the golf course to only use water that we recover on property. There's countless initiatives that we're doing, but translating that into something that the consumers can resonate with was really important.
And that's a great way of communicating it. And obviously, as consumer get to engage with you across the various, various means of communication, you can make that available to them, whether it's through an app, whether it's through, information, in-room information, in the website, throughout their journey, how you communicate in the restaurants to really help them understand that, for them to accompany you in this process of reducing food waste and whatnot. That is really good a place to start. Thank you very much for that, Frederick. Asset management, that's really where we change the game on sustainability. How do we asset manage our properties now? Roger, you have a center focus on managing properties and asset managing. You've been a GM for many years, in so many brands, from Innate to Steigenberger to Interstate, name it. You've been through various different opportunities that gave you the perspective of how you can address asset management. How much do you feel that how you manage your asset effectively and how you have that ability to diagnose the state of each asset and understanding how you can manage the operation and the consumption that you drive on property, whether it's energy, whether it's water, whether it's chemicals, waste, whatnot, and tells you exactly how that impacts operationally into your bottom line, but also how it impacts the guest experience. How important do you see that data to empower your team and your hotel managers to really act sustainably and responsibly?
Yeah, sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so
Bless you.
My voice is a little bit different than normally. No, it starts with awareness, and that's what Frederick already came up with. And then for me, there's only one way how to tackle it. If we want to reach the 1.5 degree that's set by the UN, we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by 45% by 2030. That's all a given, to be net zero by 2050. So how can we do that? And for me, only technology can help us and data. There are systems out there. But if you think about it, you need to empower your team. So if you have the systems and you have to empower your teams, how can you bring that together? So yeah, that's a complicated question, but with technology, it can be done. With revenue management, we already did a lot of things, and I think we're already now in revenue management in the third step, and we discussed that a lot. But with this topic, we are, I think, at the beginning. So
We're very green, right?
very green, yeah. Also behind the ears. So if technology can help you, so imagine, and this is a given. So you put in your data from 2019 in the 6 resources you can manage where you create your CO2 emissions. So that's energy, it's water, it's chemicals, it's waste, food waste, and your towels and linen. So you put in these data, what you have produced or what you have used in 2019, and that system gives you then at 2030 where you need to be. With the 45% that you need to reduce. So then you can start using that from, okay, what do I want? So we are now in 2023, so 7 more years to go, or more or less 6 when this year is over. So what steps do we need to do? So a system can break this down then to annual targets. You can work on it, so you can then decide for yourself, okay, I'm going to work more now on water or on the energy or whatever, but you still need to keep your target as your target. You cannot change that. So the technology helps you then really to break down, to come with your annual targets, but then also break down to your monthly targets, because at the end, what gets measured gets done. You need to manage this. And now what you see, a lot of companies are using Excel sheets, but this will not help you. You get an Excel sheet, most of the time you get then your consumption 1 month later, 2 months later, and it's not correct, etc., etc. But as said, there are systems out that can really help you then to measure. So, and if you use then the same kind of things, we discussed it all before in the other panels, a live forecasting. So imagine if you have your live forecasting, you know what your daily activities are, more or less spot on, and then you start connecting that to your resources. So how much chemicals did you use yesterday? I'm out of line, I'm out of target. So my target for the month end is this, but I'm in red. It shows you a dashboard, same like hot stats, and it says, oh, you are red. So you need to do something. And for me, I think that's the only way to get there. And so if you start using this, I think one of the a benchmark for all of us would be Strawberry. It's the former Nordic Choice. They have 200 hotels. They have implemented this system, what I'm talking about now. And they're using this now also as an index on their website. So they tell the guests how successful they are in sustainability, so in managing these 6 resources, and it gives you a 7 or it gives you an 8, but within their group they can start benchmarking and say, okay, listen, I'm only at 7 and you are at 8. Why is that? What can we do differently? And what they also do within their system is to get the best practices out of the hotels, put that in that system. And other hotels can see, oh, this and this and this. But Strawberry is not the only one yet using that system. There's also Pandox and there's some others. But I think that's the only way to do. You make it more easy to handle. It makes also fun. I think I was a GM. It's also nice to be competitive. You want to be ahead, or if you're not ahead, you want to like with your RGI, you want to grow. Oh, what did the others do? So and by breaking it down in the different departments, you also create this empowerment in the departments that they should work on this. Yeah, okay, switching off your computer when you go home. Yeah, that's one thing. But there's many more things you can do. And so, yeah, that's for me. If we must get there. It can only be done with technology.
Technology, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think our ability to have that index and to have that, let's say, bank of best practices and see how we're benchmarking becomes quite important. And investors are looking at that very, very closely because ultimately sustainability drives large investments and more of those. And Jane is here to testify that is actually happening. Jane looks after the advisory on financials in Deloitte, focusing on real estate. What is the value of sustainability as you see it today from a real estate perspective? How do you see that impacting the, let's say, how sellable an asset is, but also the value of that asset?
Well, I think everything we've talked about today so far, what drives value, and you're looking at trying to improve your bottom line all the time. Some of it may be through sustainability issues, some of it's, through other topics that we've covered. I think if you look at the different investor types, and this is probably more an emerging trend that I've seen over the last couple of years, particularly focusing on things like investors who are focused on value-add opportunities, tends to be maybe a tired resort. So the appetite for that will certainly come from a different investor group, more, as I say, driven to looking at the value opportunity rather than institutional type investors who probably actually want the proposition already baked in. So, certainly from talking to my broker colleagues, there are certain assets they cannot present to certain buyers because it's just something they can't contemplate. They're not prepared to make that investment or to take that asset into their portfolio. It doesn't meet their criteria. But if you look at the other type of investor that's looking at the value-add proposition, then there is plenty, or maybe there still is plenty of opportunity to buy up those assets, invest, and then they'll obviously sell at some point. I think what's harder to identify, unless somebody disagrees with me, is transactions where somebody has paid more because the asset fully complies with all ESG criteria and ticks every box. We're hopefully moving towards that as those investors then bring those products to the market, but I think it's a few years away. And then we may start to see higher stronger cap rates paid, higher values per key paid for those particular assets. I think at the moment, it's that value add that's being done, being invested, and yes, hopefully time will tell. I think, as we discussed before this session, we probably don't see the green premium yet. It's still very much probably a brown discount for now.
But if we look on the other side of who's financing a lot of our investments, at least compliance, with a clear compliance, with a tick box exercise of what you're doing on ESG, it becomes part of the norm of many banks and many. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the Nordics, they are already, Pandox is a good example. I mean, they use it. But they really go with this information to the bank, and they get green loans, which are better than the normals. So it is coming, and it's just a matter of time. And in 2 years, I think all the big asset owners need to show what they are doing, also financially with all their ESG, but also the operators. I think a lot of them still don't realize this, but things need to be done, and it feels like this is going in that direction, and probably then faster than we can imagine.
Oh, no, I'd agree, and I think it's not just hospitality. I think all valuers are asked by lenders, I say the majority of lenders that I've come across, to complete certain forms, etc., as part of that valuation process to confirm, does the property comply, are there various issues to flag, etc. So no, it's increasingly so, and I'd agree there are some lenders that will offer slightly better terms if you can tick those boxes,
And I think Roger, as we have you on, integrating the finance into this whole, into this whole resource planning aspect of the asset management to monitor the impact that we have in real time, how important it is from your perspective, how that ability to react and apply corrective actions, but in time, not after we've already come to the end of the month.
Yeah, yeah, that's key. So because if you connect, let's say, the consumption to with your daily business activities, and of course your consumption is also connected to a unit price, so you know exactly where you are trending for month end. So Tone Hotels is using that system. So. And
You could say the name.
No,
It's okay. Safe.
It's PMI, and I used to work with it as well. And I still remember when I left. I mean, and it is really a change of the way you work. And when I left Pandox and I went to the Middle East, and I thought, oh, everything great there. But all of a sudden, I think, oh, I missed this guidance. It feels like before I had Google Maps. And I was driving, and I knew exactly where I was going. And if it turned into the wrong direction, it turned me back. All of a sudden, I had a map again with Excel and whatever. So, and that's why for me as a GM, I always loved it, and not only because of let's say making sure that you have your manning levels on the right level on a daily basis, so you can serve your guests, so your guest satisfaction get as high as possible on the busy days, and on the not so busy days you have only a lower number of staff, but also for the other resources, because sometimes you would thought your forecast was whatever, and then your month starts. And a lot of companies are still kind of, okay, this is my forecast for the month, and then they break it down per day, divided by 31 or by 30 or whatever, how many days, and that's then your daily target. But that's, of course, not the case. You have different business levels on different. So sometimes you think you're really doing great, but you forget that you don't have any business coming at the end of the month. So having a live forecast and then matching your resources, you really know, okay, I really need to do something here. We are behind. We really need to, I need to make this target by month end. So let's go for it. And then you bring it into your team. So for me, if I would be a GM or whatever, or an asset company, I would start working with such a system. It is out there. I think not everyone knows it yet, but it will be a game changer.
100%. And I think talking about this ability to understand how it impacts your asset value, but also the valuation aspect, Frederick, as an ownership group, right? How sustainability impacts your decision criteria to work with a specific brand and have your brand, your asset branded by a company or another. How important is sustainability? How deeply is it integrated now into that whole valuation process?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to Jane's point earlier about kind of like green premium or brown discount. Like if you look at, there was a stat about like office buildings in London and having to meet like EPC-B by 2030, and currently 80% of the office stock does not meet EPC-B. So from an institutional perspective, those are going to become stranded assets if nothing's done about it. People are going to have to put in really serious money over the next couple of years to upgrade their properties to a level where they're even like physically allowed to sell to customers. And I think that's going to trickle into the hotel space. So from our point of view, we don't just look at what's happening in the hotel space in isolation. It's kind of what's happening in the wider real estate markets. It's very much going on in the office space. It's happening on the residential side. So from a hotel perspective, it's how do we protect the investment that we're making? How do we make sure that when we go to sell, we're not going to be penalized because either we haven't met the standard or we haven't been able to demonstrate that we're on a pathway to eventually meeting that standard at whatever point in time the regulations kick in. And that obviously covers a range of different aspects from the operational side with the operator. It looks at the physical building characteristics, like does it have the right insulation or whatever, or even looking at the new construction side where are you building it not only to the current standard, but are you making sure you're meeting the future standards as you might expect them to be? So I think on the operational side is something we work with the operating partners that we have on. Some are much better than others, but I think it's our responsibility as the asset owner to make sure that this is the level we need to reach, and how can we work with you to make sure that this is implemented? Because as you say, kind of, it's not in everyone's focus right now, but very quickly it's going to be front and center. And kind of, can we guide them along to make sure that we get to where we need to be?
100%. I think, Jane, I remember in our short briefing, we were trying to pick ideas what to put on this panel. I remember you were saying in commercial, a slightly different situation, right? When we talk about commercial lets and how it impacts their ability to let the property. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's to Frederick's point. It's certainly evident. And we've done some analysis that does demonstrate that offices which meet the criteria or comply with all ESG requirements will command a higher rent compared to an office which doesn't. And to be honest, yes, some of those are becoming stranded assets. And you're probably all aware of that opportunity to convert some of those buildings to hotels. And we've seen that happen actually post-GFC, but we're also seeing it starting to happen now, where it's just going to be too expensive. But certainly, yes, that is an identifiable trend that's already in place, that you can see those higher rents are paid. And I think there's just generally post-COVID, there's a much greater demand from employers or from employees rather, to provide high quality grade A office space to encourage people back to the office. And sustainability criteria is top of that agenda.
And I think that's also like in the hotel space, where retention and hiring is such a challenge in the industry at the moment, that you have to provide a workspace where people feel like they can buy into your overall vision, and you need to do something meaningful and communicate that not to your guest only, but also to the staff members who are working there, to make them feel like this is something I want to be a part of, and I want to stay here and I want to work here.
Yeah.
Was it you, Roger? I remember one of you were saying how it impacts the retention, that the sustainability impacts the retention of staff, and how was it? 5 out of 10 would reject a company.
Oh, that was
it
stat
you?
I
Sorry.
heard, yeah.
You tell me about that.
I don't think it's hospitality, but a stat I heard that young people, whatever bracket you put that in, I assume people in their 20s, 1 in 3 declined a job offer from an employer because they didn't agree with their sustainable credentials. So,
There we go. That is a very interesting stat. Okay, well, next we're going to talk about our planet. So we've talked about consumer, how we communicate, how important it is to asset manage, how it impacts our asset value. Now we're going to talk about some practical solutions to climate change. Obviously, we have our Agenda 2030 that Roger is very well articulated to us, and we have seen some pretty incredible changes, extreme changes in our weather, right? Whether it's heat or whether it's rainfall that's creating flooding, all consequences of climate change. And there's a very clear alert to all of us that we really need to act on our carbon emissions today. But there's one specific area that's become really, really critical in our 2030 agenda, and that is avoiding the emissions generated by food waste. Food waste is the third largest, or if you like, the third largest emitter of global greenhouse gas emission, and is 37% of all the emissions, the global food waste, food production system. How are you tackling food waste today, and what are the KPIs that you care about when you tackle food waste, and how do you see tackling food waste actually impacting your bottom line? How profitable it is to tackle food waste? And I'm going to see if I can whilst you guys think about that, see if I can bring my slides to work here, because we've got a few very interesting information that we'd like to present to people. Okay, all right. Do we want to approach that, or do we want to think a little bit more, and then I make a quick intro on food waste? Should I make a quick intro on food waste? Okay. All right. I need somebody to help me with those slides to change over there, right? So Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. We've got a bit of a clicker issue here, but we have a human clicker called Catherine Cockhill. Thank you very much, Catherine. Okay, so why do we need to talk about food waste? I think we, it's something that possibly sits there in the back of our head, and we don't really mind whether we throw, how much food we discard and how we consume that food and whatnot. But it actually is such a big issue for hospitality. A third of everything that we produce food-wise gets discarded. A third of everything we produce food-wise. And imagine of all the resources that we need to produce that food. And 70% of that, it's still fit for human consumption. Whilst we have over 800 million people starving effectively every single day. So we've got a big imbalance there in terms of how we're tackling it. But it is the second largest carbon emitter, the third largest carbon emitter. But from a global food production system, it generates 37% of those emissions, which is 3 times more than what airlines actually produce for us. And that's why it's becoming such a huge issue for us. If we change the slide, we'll see that if it was a country, it will be the 3rd largest country in the world in terms of emissions. And unfortunately, barely about 5% of hospitality professionals actually take action on food waste. We've got a serious issue. We've got a very key target. By 2030, we have to slash our food waste by 50%. And we really need to act on that today. What happens is when food gets into the landfill, it obviously degrades. And what it emits is methane. Methane is 20% more harmful than CO2. So the impact on climate change is extremely brutal. If we change to the next slide, we'll see that obviously that impact is pretty clear. It's from an environmental standpoint, a financial and a social standpoint. And this is our, if we move to the next slide, this is our goal for the next few years, is how can we really slash that food waste by 50% as part of the actions that we need to take. That's been very highly appointed by the UN, and it also obviously is part of the Sustainable Developmental Goals to fight the hunger, to produce and consume responsibly, and also to partner up and create synergies to make sure that that food and that excessive food that we have does not arrive and does not end into the landfill. If we move to the next slide, we'll see that it's obviously a very strong misconception that we see when we talk about food waste. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of food waste. We're underestimating effectively the impact of food waste and the financial impact of food waste within our business by a factor of 3 to 8. On average, industry-wide, we see that per guest, per cover, we put in the bin between 150 to 250 grams for every single cover. So getting that visibility is absolutely critical. And also our knowledge about where food waste happens, we tend to believe, buffet is the big issue. Buffet is 10 to 15% of where the food waste happens. 50% of it happens before the buffet in our preparation stage. But also the cost of food, which is really, we look as an industry, what's our food percentage cost reported to revenue? And we see that, and we say, that looks good. Okay, then I shouldn't have much food waste. Well, actually, we need more KPIs to look at, because if we look at our food waste per cover, that becomes dramatic, the situation and the insights that we're able to drive from that. And it actually impacts, from a margin standpoint, 6 to 14% of the food waste and the cost of food is responsible for this. If we move to the next slide, we will see where exactly that 50% of the food waste is generated. So it involves purchasing, it involves reception, distribution, storage, and preparation. How well are we controlling? Are we monitoring food waste today? Do we know what we're doing in every single one of these phases? And then obviously, how do we communicate with the guest and get their compromise in terms of the initiative we fight through? Next slide, Catherine, thank you, is, what is our approach to food waste? Obviously, our goal is to reduce as much as possible the amount of food that we waste. But if there's food excess, there's surplus, we need to look at initiatives that enable us to pass that excess to people in need or charities that can make good use of the products that we are able to use. And then whatever we've not been able to use because they weren't fit for human consumption, we have to use or process into animal food. Finally, to avoid any waste going to the landfill, we have to transform it as much as possible. Try and find players in our local markets that can collect our food waste so they can transform it into compost for our gardens and our communities, into green electricity and green gas that we can actually use on property. There are even very compact machines that we can put in our hotels, in the service areas, that can real-time, on-demand transform that food waste that we're producing into that energy. What do we actually need to tackle food waste? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We need, first of all, the awareness that we need to act. We need to enable people to drive awareness on why they need to act on food waste. And once we do, we'll see that will stay and will remain with them forever, not just in our businesses, but when they go home, they will act more responsibly about how they're managing how they're effectively consuming those products and how they're discarding them. And on the other side, we need a food waste monitoring system. Obviously, Excel is an option, but it's not an option because we can't scale. And to Roger's point, we cannot be inputting data. We have to be agile. If we move to the next slide, and we have to have technology ready to act for us. It can be an app on a tablet. It can be an AI-powered system, whatever it is, that helps us monitor and measure how much waste we're producing into each one of our services, into each category of food that we effectively purchase. And this is some basic type of equipment. We need one or two scales, a couple of bins, some posters, the containers per categories of foods that we need to measure. And in our next slide, we can see a very simple setup of a food recording station. It can be adapted to any size and space that is effectively available on property. Next slide, we have what are the gains really for us of tackling food waste. If we're able to monitor food waste, we're able to identify what are the hot spots and areas that are quick wins for us to address. Maybe it's the amount of food that we're bringing out to the buffet. Maybe it's the amount of food that we produce. Maybe is how we position it in front of our consumers. Maybe it's the recipients, the sizes. There's very quick wins that can allow us to reduce that food waste immediately. But on average, with these food waste programs, and there's so many out there in the market, you're able to reduce between 30 to 40% as an average. On top of that, it's going to impact your ability to reduce your food costs by at least 5 to 10%. Above all, you're going to be able to have the team accompanying you in this journey, because at the end of the day, if you don't have somebody that takes that effort to manage this whole process and empowers people with knowledge and with positive reinforcement, it's a journey, right? That we need to take. But ultimately, we've seen how important sustainability is in communicating with our customers, and attracting and retaining our customers. And obviously, we need to start complying with the regulations on food waste. We all know those are being enforced gradually, and we need to work with the partners that allow us to foster that type of collaboration. From the projects that we're doing, if we move to the next slide, we can see a very, very swift impact. In a matter of 4 to 5 months, you're able to tackle food waste. You're able to reduce on average between 30 to 40% and save more than, in the case of the Hyatt pilot program we've been working on, more than 134,000 tons of CO2 have not been released into the atmosphere. And obviously that represented also a saving, a pretty sizable saving. In 5 months, they've saved $250,000. That goes straight into our bottom line. So acting on food waste, not just responsible, it is profitable. Another project that we have been working on in Benidorm, actually, with the Magic Crystal Park, part of the Magic Costa Blanca group, they've taken a serious stance on food waste, and they wanted to go in and see what is the potential with one of their largest properties, just over 450 rooms. On a daily basis, we're looking at 2,500 to 4,000 covers per day. To start with, the baseline that we have recorded over a period of a week, we've seen that they were generating about 352 kilograms of waste per day. They've been able to reduce that in less than 5 months by 32%, and the food waste grams per cover by over 26%. That obviously saved more than 39,000 meals because they weren't wasted. And then obviously it saved the emissions, more than 50,000 kilograms of emissions, equal to 407,000 kilometers in a car that were not released into the atmosphere. And obviously the upside is the savings. They've saved almost $80,000 on not buying that food that was going to be wasted. So that's just a quick overview of, we can sort of like wrap up with the next slide, Catherine, of how important it is to act on food waste, how easy it is to get to those quick wins, and how profitable it is. And I'm going to come back to you because I'd really like to hear from you. How are you tackling food waste today? And, what are the KPIs that are important to you when you look at the impact of food waste into your bottom lines? Frederick, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, so I think starting with just kind of what we physically do with the waste, it's been important to us that all of that goes into recycling, and like measuring how much food waste we produce and making sure that none of that goes into landfills. How can we mitigate it? How can we reduce it? The second bit is in relation to food costs, obviously. I think it's really focused everyone's attention when you see kind of what's happening to food pricing, and you're kind of constantly trying to re-engineer your menus to drive more profitability out of it. But the flip side of the coin is, how can you just use less, or how can you be more efficient with the products you use? I think a lot of the measures are very operational, in the sense that there's not necessarily like a magic piece of tech or kit that you can bring in to solve all these problems, and a lot of that is working with your existing workforce. There's tools out there similar to kind of what you put up on the screen, where kind of some friends of mine run a company where they essentially produce one of these scales that has like a camera. There's like an eye system that tracks essentially everything that goes into the bin, and then you get stats on kind of daily, weekly, monthly basis about like, you threw out 32 kilos of potatoes, like fact, what do you do about it? So, and I think getting data like that isn't necessarily going to reduce the food waste, but it's the starting point for actioning something about it.
100%, 100%. Roger, any further thoughts from your side?
Yeah, a little bit. I agree. So the metrics or the KPIs would be really the food cost and the grams or the kilograms that you waste, so that you start measuring this. Yeah. But I would again start digging it down on a daily basis, because on average on a month it can be nice, but it can be, of course, if I have my body, it's 37 degrees. But if I'm half in the oven and half in the freezer, it's still 37 degrees. It's average, but
you might be
not so sure if that is so. So you really need to look at the daily production And that can be done with all these tools. So, and then align it with your business activities, because otherwise, otherwise you start, let's say, celebrating something where you can say, "Hey, come on, you are far out of what you could have reached." So that would be my addition to this story.
Super valuable, super valuable. Jane, I guess you don't manage a lot of footways there in real estate, but you will see the impact on the value of that asset and how sellable it is.
Yeah, because there is one wise man, and he was the former CEO of Pandox. He said, every €1 that we gain in, or £1 that we gain in GOP, it will be 10 in the value of the assets.
Wow, that is a very important statement, and I'm sure it's a pretty well documented statement. We'll see some Pandox data later on today. Well, thank you ever so much for this incredible opportunity to position how important sustainability is into our asset value, but also into our businesses and how we manage our business model going forward. So thank you so much.